Welcome to Our Town, a 30-minute podcast brought to you by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks.
This is Andy Ockersell. This is Our Town, and we have the great pleasure to meet and talk to a man that many of you have read and heard, may not know him as well as I know him now, and that's Thom Loverro. And Tom, welcome to Our Town.
Glad to be here, Andy. Ecstatic to be here.
Well, so am I. To get back on WML is worth something to both of us, and I appreciate that. But you went to school in Stroudsburg. That's in Pennsylvania, but you're Brooklyn. You were born in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, I was born 4 blocks from Ebbets Field.
Oh.
And I have a vague memory
Flatbush.
of being taken to a game at Ebbets Field. I have a vague memory of leaving the stadium after a Dodgers game. But yeah, I grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers house, and then when they left, a New York Mets house.
When did they die? 59? Is that when they all pulled
57
up?
was their last season.
And then they moved
Brooklyn.
to the coast.
Yeah, in fact, Gil Hodges' brother-in-law used to be my barber when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
A neighborhood barbershop,
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, because the players then, they lived in the neighborhood where
That's right.
everybody else lived. They didn't make a ton of money like they do now.
And they were stayed close to the neighbors. I remember I went to a game in Ebbets Field. My brother-in-law was a fireman then. Now they're firefighters, but he was a fireman. You know, firemen had the badge; they could get in anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
He'd take me to Flatbush and to see the Dodgers play. And God, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was in like the 40s because he had just gotten out of the Navy. And I loved Brooklyn because it was so home. That ballpark was part of the neighborhood.
Yes, yeah, it was. I can remember there was a bowling alley across the street that was owned on Empire Boulevard. That was owned by Freddie Fitzsimmons. Used to be a pitcher
I know
for
the
the
name.
New York Giants, and I used to bowl there when I was a kid. So, and I remember I watched them tear down Ebbets Field too when I was about 8 years old.
What happened to the land? Did they go up?
Now it's an apartment complex. I think it's been an apartment complex for years with a different name. Might have been Jackie Robinson Apartments for a while. Maybe
that
it's
right?
Ebbets Field
Never heard
Apartments
that.
now.
Where did they put the basketball arena? Is that not near Flatbush?
That is where, ironically, the basketball arena, which is on Atlantic Avenue, right, at the end of I think Washington Avenue, but it's in Atlantic Avenue. That was where Walter O'Malley wanted to build a stadium for the Dodgers.
To stay.
To
stay.
stay. That was the piece of land. But Robert Moses, who was the director of Parks and Planning, wanted to build highways to move everybody out of town. And he didn't want to get a new stadium built. He wanted people added to. He wanted them to build a stadium for the Dodgers where the Mets play now out in Queens.
Is that right? Well, Moses did a lot of great things for Long Island. I know that Jones Beach and the trail, the parkways
But the city
and everything.
suffered. City suffered as a
But
result.
didn't do much for the stadium.
No.
So how did you end up at East Stroudsburg State? You went to high school in Brooklyn?
Went to high school in East Stroudsburg. My father got laid off from his job in New York around 1965. We had been going to the Poconos, East Stroudsburg area, on vacation every year, and my family thought it was a good time to get out of the city and move to the Poconos. So we pulled up roots and moved to big cultural difference. A small town, East Stroudsburg, 5,000 people.
From Brooklyn.
It's funny. When my first year in school in 7th grade, they sent me to speech therapy class because they thought there was something wrong with the way I talked, and then they realized it was just my Brooklyn accent. Really, that's
Which
a true
is different,
story.
absolutely. You could spot Brooklyn was different than Queens or New York City. Brooklyn had their own world.
Yeah,
which was a great world.
But I loved growing up in East Stroudsburg too. It was great to grow up in the city, and great to grow up in a small town.
And you went to school at the University of Scranton, which is a Jesuit school, I hear.
Yes, it is. I bounced around a little bit though, Andy. I didn't start out at University
But Scranton was a very, very good school.
Yeah, well, I started out at Miami, and most of the people who have heard me on ESPN radio know this story. I left Miami literally under.
How'd you get to Miami from East
Well,
Stroudsburg?
my sister lived in Miami, worked at University of Miami, and I had spent a couple of summers in Miami, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Oh, you had to.
So, but I had to leave school under a cloud when I burnt down half of my fraternity house with a cigar. An accident.
And you still smoke.
An accident, yeah. So I didn't learn my lesson. I burned down half a building and I still didn't learn my lesson. So eventually I wound up at University of Scranton, a big difference from Miami.
Wow.
But it's probably what I needed.
Well, from the UM, that was the glory years when you were in school down there.
No, not really. They didn't have basketball, and the football team wasn't good. That was before Howard Schellenberger arrived.
Oh, yeah, he started the whole
program
revolution.
Changed around. Miami there were glory years, but they weren't on the football field or the stadium. I could
but
say
Coral
that.
Gables was not a bad place to be.
Yes.
But back to the Jesuits in Scranton, where we had Father what was his name? Curley came down here to be president of CU.
Yeah.
He had been up at Scranton. That's the name. First time I didn't know there was a university. I always thought of Scranton as coal country.
Yeah. Well,
that's
Scranton,
where I grew up.
It's a very isolated city. I always used to say it could disappear off the face of the earth and you wouldn't read about it for 3 days in the New York Times because there's nothing around there. But it was a good school, just what I needed to really straighten myself out and get my focus is what I needed to do.
And that's when you decided to become a writer and to become a journalist and go in the newspaper business in school or after you got out of school?
Oh, that was way before. I wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid. I used to, when we grew up in Brooklyn, we were a newspaper family, and my dad would bring home the Daily News and the Daily Mirror every night. I would read them. I'd read the sports sections.
They were both tabloids,
yes,
correct?
Yeah. I used to read Dick Young, Jimmy Cannon,
wow,
guys like that. So I wanted to be a sports writer since I was 10 years old. I just didn't take it seriously until I got to Scranton.
Right, and then the Jesuits helped you get started with that.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Baltimore. You eventually went to the Sun, but that was later.
Yeah, I worked for a couple of newspapers in Pennsylvania, and then I wound up working at the Baltimore Sun starting in 1984 as a news editor and reporter.
A desk job?
I was in charge of a bureau out in Howard County.
Wow.
I was in charge of a bureau, a zoned edition, like a neighbor section. I know the Washington Post used to have like a Maryland section, a D.C. section. Well, the Sun had the same thing. And then I started reporting for a while, covering the state for the paper.
Annapolis? You covered Annapolis?
Well, I used to cover Western Maryland. I had everything from Frederick West. It was a great...
Cumberland?
Yeah. I used to spend a lot of time out there, a lot of great stories out there, and working at the Baltimore Sun
as a news reporter.
Yeah.
Not sports.
No, I didn't start doing sports until I came to the Times in 1992, which is ironic because I grew up wanting to be a sports writer.
You grew up almost at Ebbets Field,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
So Western Maryland was beginning to explode then, though, when you were out there. It became a big part. Did you go all the way to the lake?
Deep Creek Lake.
You went over that far?
All that far, and that's a different world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out there. I mean, it's
Garrett County.
That's Appalachia out there in Garrett County.
No question about it.
Yeah,
Third world.
Maryland's an interesting state because it's so wide and it's so different in different parts. I mean, out in Garrett and Allegheny County is nothing like it is here. Like, got more in common with West Virginia than it does with
that same
Maryland.
thing's true in the state of Virginia. The western part of Virginia has nothing to do with the east.
Absolutely.
The counties, like they disdain Washington, they disdain the Arlington and Fairfax group. They don't want any parts of it. It's the same thing in Maryland.
Yeah.
So it's not unusual. So if starting as a writer, then was that great training to be a sports writer? I know people have done that. They've gone from sports to news, but you went from news to sports. Is that unusual?
Yeah, I think it is unusual to some extent. You don't see it happen much anymore. It was great for me. All my sports writer friends are going to hate this, but it's a lot easier writing sports than it is news. It just is. The rules are different.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
The rules are
easier. You got to dig for the news.
Yeah. I mean, the news is much more accountable. And so, it gave me great training to cover sports, and not just sports, but all the issues that deal with sports. I had to cover a baseball strike in 1994, the steroid stuff in baseball. So I had a news training that equipped me to deal with the more complicated issues that were coming around in sports.
Yeah, the sports world was changing as the news world was changing.
Yeah.
And we're talking to Thom Loverro, and Thom is Baltimore's son, but I remember him when he came to Washington with the Washington Times. As I told you, we grew up WMAL as part of the Washington Star, so I knew a little bit about the newspaper business. And I wanted the Times to make it because I wanted to replace this the Washington Star, which was so important to the community.
I know. And that was an afternoon paper, right? The Star
Yes, it was.
I worked for an afternoon paper in Pennsylvania for 3 years, the Easton Express, home of Larry Holmes and Lafayette College, Crayola crayons. But, at home, and maybe I should bring this in and give this to you. I have a news rack at my house, a Washington Star news rack, and I think it's cool because,
it doesn't exist anymore.
But it would probably mean more to somebody like you. I should give it to you.
Well, Tom, that's very generous of you. I love the Star and what it meant to our town. And the WMAL was the Star and so forth. But then you transitioned when you came down to Washington. You worked for the Washington Times, a different world, a different city than you had been used to. But you adapted to it and became a star in some way. Well, I use that loosely for a fact.
Thank you. I covered the Redskins in '92 for 1 year, Joe Gibbs last year. And then they put me on the baseball beat covering the Orioles from 93 through 95, and then I became a columnist. The Times has given me...
You're somewhat of a baseball expert. I listened to you on radio for years, of course, but people always called upon Thom Loverro to talk about baseball.
Yeah, and in this town, I think there was a void because there was no baseball team for so long.
Orioles were us.
It was the Orioles, and I know how big the Orioles were here when they were, going to the World Series. It was still a big deal. But
big deal.
I know. But I know, Edward Bennett Williams, owned the team. I know that he kept the World Series trophy at Duke's. At Duke's Everts. I know all about that.
Tommy, Well, we're going to take a break here, Tom, and come back and talk about Ed Williams wanted to bring that baseball team to Washington, too. We all know that. I'm talking with Thom Loverro. This is Our Town, and we're now going to be talking about Washington baseball.
This is Sonny Jurgensen. Got a confession to make. I let my wife drag me to one of those Mike Collins estate planning seminars. Like I don't have enough on my plate with a certain football team. Actually, it wasn't too bad. In fact, we both learned a whole lot about how to protect our kids and grandkids down the road and to take care of ourselves right now. So if you get one of Mike's invitations in the mail, go. I'm glad I did. Get all the information and register online at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
This is Our Town, and we're talking with Thom Loverro, and we were interrupted by my producer to say that you got to take a break now, but we were talking about Edward Bennett Williams and the Orioles and what was on his mind about bringing that team to Washington. He was talking about, I know that for a fact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was. And I know that there was actually not only just into Washington, but also maybe someplace between the two cities. They looked at a piece of land in Howard County that they were seriously, considering putting a stadium there. And I think what helped keep the Orioles in Baltimore was losing the Colts. I think that William Donald Schaefer, the mayor, after losing the Colts like they did, was not going to do anything.
They could not let that team live.
They couldn't. That was it for them. The city, as much as some people don't like it, a city more so than ever identifies with a sports franchise.
And it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and so they couldn't let the Orioles leave, and they had this last minute stadium deal signed by the General Assembly to fund a new ballpark there. I remember Larry Lucchino, who worked for Ed Williams, telling me basically they were signing the details of the stadium deal on a cocktail napkin on a train from Washington going up to Baltimore the night that they were going to announce it at Memorial Stadium. So it was right down to the wire.
I'm sure it was.
And but that gave us a great ballpark in Camden Yards, and as a result, that gave us a baseball team in Washington.
Oh yeah, one did the other.
If they had put that stadium in Howard County,
never would have happened. You're right.
Never would have gotten a team here.
Well, I lived through that as you did, and we're talking about it now. And the fact is that the the problems we had with baseball was the Baltimore felt that they couldn't support the team if part of that population came to Washington and didn't go up there. But we would advertise on Comcast Sportsnet, because we had the games, that Baltimore was a baseball town and was going to make it, and I think it's been proven, Tom. Baltimore has got a very good fan base, maybe bigger than Washington.
They do. They've got a solid traditional fan base, something that Washington is going to take years to develop.
Yeah, that's right. It took a long time.
The tradition of going to the game. What happens in Baltimore is, and they had some attendance problems this year, has nothing to do with the fan base, has everything to do with the organization. They finally got the baseball part right in Baltimore, but they don't run the business very well.
Is that right?
They did not set. They're typically the last team in baseball to put season tickets on sale. And last year they had a fan fest, and they didn't have any tickets to sell. So if you want to know why there's nobody showing up at Camden Yards in August, is because they're not selling tickets in the winter. Because that's the lifeblood.
They're merchandising their product.
Yeah. So, but I think the fan base is solid in Baltimore. There's more than enough fans in this area to support a baseball team in both cities. When both teams are doing well, you're talking about 6 million fans a year.
That's it. That's it. We consider Baltimore, Washington, is one when it comes to the sports fan, and I think we've proven that. Baltimore's a little more successful football. Washington's a little more successful baseball. But they're still wonderful, wonderful markets, and we need them both.
Yeah.
I love the Orioles.
Yeah.
I'm a Nats fan, but I love the Orioles.
Absolutely. I've written a couple of books about the Orioles. So
you're quite a prolific author, Tom.
Well, not anymore. Not anymore. There was a 10-year period where I was locked in a basement every night writing a book.
Did you ever make any money out of book writing?
I made enough for it to be worth my while, but did I ever make, let's say, John Feinstein money? No,
no.
Not that kind of money.
He's a novelist, of course. John has run real well. Tom, what about your broadcast career? I want to get into that, but also about your writing now. That I'm
still writing for the Times.
Still writing for the Times. You're
Yeah.
still a columnist,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And that's successful.
It's successful for me. I like voicing my opinions. I wanted to be when I started out as a news reporter. Then I wanted to be a news columnist. I wanted to be Jimmy Breslin. That's who I really wanted to be.
Long Island.
So the next best thing is being a sports columnist. So I've been very fortunate to be in a town that's had some great sports columnists in this town. I was fortunate enough to work with Mo Siegel at the end of his career.
At the end of his life,
at the Washington
right?
Times. I've been to Vegas. I was at Vegas with Mo, covering fights.
Oh yeah, I saw you at fights.
Yeah, so
when Brotman was there, every time Brotman had a fight, I'd go to Las Vegas.
There you go. I was fortunate enough. I added up all the times that I went to Las Vegas to cover boxing while I was at the Times, and it adds up to a total of over 8 months.
Wow.
Over like 25 years.
Oh, my God.
8 months in
Vegas.
Vegas on someone else's
on
dime.
Radio. They used to always have you out in Las Vegas. You giving reports to your radio show. Yeah. And I would listen because, following the people you fight. I remember you covered a Buster Douglas fight, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I covered a lot of the Tyson fights, all the Riddick Bowe fights, Evander Holyfield.
Bowe knows. You remember that promotion, don't you?
I was ringside when Mike Tyson bit off Evander Holyfield's ear.
I remember that so vividly. Yeah. Oh my.
What a night that was.
And Tyson is now a big star, of course. He's in the motion picture business, and he's got a one-man show.
Well, I bet you Mike Tyson's surprised that he's still around.
I bet.
And so I figure he probably thinks he's playing with house money at this point.
Well, exactly. His life has been that way. He had some Washington efforts here, He used to eat someplace along Wisconsin Avenue all the time, near Chadwick's. He dated somebody, was going with some girl going to George Washington or Georgetown University.
He was married to somebody, too, around here.
Around here, right.
Yeah.
And he was in town for a while, Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
I remember that vividly, Janet. Our producer's thinking. She's thinking about it, Tom, but that's a fact.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to boxing, did you travel? Did you do Super Bowls for the paper?
I didn't do many Super Bowls. We had a division where the other columnists would do most of the Super Bowls. I would do the baseball. He would do the football. And we'd split a lot of the other stuff. I got to cover a couple of Olympics. I got to go to Nagano for the Winter Olympics in '98.
Is that right?
And I got to go to Sydney for the greatest Olympics in 2000. They should hold the Olympics in Sydney all the time.
That was a beautiful setting, wasn't it?
It was
everything down there.
Everything just worked in Sydney. I mean, those people know how to have a good time.
Efficient.
The dollar exchange was unbelievably favorable, and it was just. I was there for a month. And it's one of the best times I ever had.
I bet, living like a king, huh?
Yeah, it was, and covering great, great Olympic events. So I've covered that. 3 Olympics at the time, so I was very fortunate.
Was that your only Summer Olympics with Sydney?
Yeah, I covered the 2 Winter Olympics, the one in Nagano in '98 and Salt Lake City in 2002.
Well, they're going back to Japan, correct? But that's for the Summer Olympics?
That's 2020 for the Summer Olympics. Nobody wants to host the Olympics anymore because it's a bad bet. I mean, it's a bad deal for a handful of people.
The Olympic Committee,
yes,
and that's for the organizing committee.
Who build infrastructure and new buildings, for the Olympics. Everybody else, it's a bad deal. I mean, in Brazil, the children who are going to pay the debt on the past Olympics, they haven't even been born yet.
Sure it's going to go that far. And they haven't improved the lifestyle of anybody down there but the people of the committee.
Yeah, so, I mean...
The slums are still the slums.
It's getting harder and harder to convince cities. Boston was the IOC, the International Olympic Committee representative, to bid for the 2024 games, and then they changed their mind.
They didn't want them.
They backed out.
Oh, I know that.
So it's hard.
Tom, we had an effort here I was involved in, the first one way back. I think we were trying to get to 2012 Olympics.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then we fought and had a lot of good committees and did a lot of great work. But unfortunately, we didn't get it. I think the NOW group came along later for 2024.
Right.
And didn't even get to the first base. Got nowhere.
No.
Which I think is great. We don't need that.
No.
We can't afford it. I keep saying, who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. It's a TV show now. Let the TV networks pay for it. And let them put it on an island and have hosted there every couple of years.
Yeah. We'll have a permanent Olympic site.
Absolutely.
That would work. It is
Olympic
a
Island.
Show.
There we go.
Great television show, too.
Yes.
Because the networks did a great job. I thought the feed coming out of there was unbelievable.
It's fabulous TV show.
But it didn't do anything for Rio.
No.
And I don't know what it did for London. London didn't even need it, but they got it because of ego.
Yeah.
But you couldn't rebuild London. It was already built up. We're going to take another break here. We're talking with Thom Loverro, and we're going to get into his broadcast career, which is still simmering as far as I'm concerned.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell everybody about our newest restaurant over off New York Avenue. It's called Ivy City Smokehouse, 1356 Oakey Street Northeast, right next to the Heck Company warehouse. It is terrific, and we have the only seafood smoker in the District of Columbia. So when you go to your grocery stores or your delis, ask for Ivy City products. 202-529-3300 or ivycitysmokehouse.com.
Our Town with Andy Ockershausen.
We're talking to Thom Loverro. I wanted to bring up his broadcast career and all he did, because I listened for years to him on team, and I thought that he had a good thing going, but life changes, Tom, and it changes for you, and changes for us listeners. And I can't stand the new broadcast, and that's no reflection on you. It's just, it's not what I liked, and it's different now, which everything's different, I guess.
Right.
Tom.
Well, you know as well as anybody how volatile radio is.
Oh.
I mean, but like the two things I loved growing up were newspapers and radio. I mean, I remember going to sleep on Tuesday nights as a kid with a transistor radio under my pillow, listening to Cousin Brucey count down the top 20 for that week on WABC. So
Radio 77.
Yeah, radio was big for me, and to be able to be on the radio, which was purely by accident. They just asked me to start filling in on the sports reporters once about 15 years ago, and that's how it all came about. So to be able to do that and newspaper work, I mean, I'm blessed.
There's no question about that. And being in radio was help you with your column, and your column helped your radio career.
Yeah, and now
one hand washed the other. And
now I've ventured into your area of expertise. Apparently, I've started a podcast.
What? You got your own podcast?
Yes,
you and Tony.
That's right.
People say, well, you did it because Tony. Tony did it for money. He didn't do it for pie. We did it because we wanted a voice. Janice and I wanted to get back in the thing. But Tony did it for money. I hope you did it for money.
Well, I did it for both. And I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying it. It's called Cigars and Curveballs.
I knew you were doing a great show.
And it's available on iTunes and Google Play. We've had Cal Ripken. We've had George Foreman. We've had Joe Jacoby.
Wow.
Dusty Baker. And I really have enjoyed doing it because it's my thing. You know, it's something I'm in charge of.
Right.
I have to go out and get the sponsors for it. I have to set up the interviews. So I'm really enjoying it a lot. I'm sure you're enjoying this, right?
This is one of the great things that's happened. And it was Janice's idea to do it. You know, she was 32 years at WMAL. I was 36. So we grew up in radio and loved every minute of it. And then we got away from it for a while and still lived because I went with Comcast and Janice started her own business. And then one day she said, we got to get back to doing things that we can do to help our town. And let's get something started. This is her baby. I didn't know what podcasting was. That scared me to death. It's radio without a transmitter.
It's radio on demand. This is what people want. They want to listen to what they want when they want it.
Tom, that's what's happening to the television business, too.
Yes, I know. I teach a class at Georgetown called The Business of Sports Media, and we deal with the whole changing viewing habits in that class. And you've got a generation growing up that watches TV different than you or I did.
No question.
Same with radio as well.
You know, years ago, I said, and 20, 30 years ago, I said, half of the population has never listened to an AM station. The world is changing. AM radio is going to be a dead duck.
Yeah.
Because it's not that it was bad. It was that this FM thing was so good.
Yes.
And we adopted that at WML with AM and FM. And I think the same thing is happening to television. Television that you and I grew up with is not going to exist in 10 years. I don't think cable is either. What do you think of that?
I don't think it will either. People are running to figure out ways to cut the cord, to watch streaming, you know, because again, it's all about when they want to watch it. I mean, they don't sit there and say, well, it's 8:00 on a Wednesday night. I'm going to sit down and watch these shows. They're going to download those shows and then watch them whenever they want to.
And they got to have equipment to do that.
Yes.
And what I think is going to happen, Tom, I'm not sure when, but the delivery system on cable is a dead duck because of the cost of it. Because there's going to be some delivery system similar to what we got. It's come on your phone or your computer. Your television signal is going to come in a different way. Television will be there, but it won't come by cable because that's expensive. Yeah. And the new wave is to save money.
Well, you know what? You and we're at the beginning of the revolution. Right here.
Podcasting, isn't it great? Right. And it's there forever. That's what I like.
Yeah.
You know, people, now we call our friends in California or Nebraska or Washington, wherever, they can get our podcast. It doesn't cost them a dime.
And they can hear the ones that you've done before.
Absolutely.
They're all there for people. People binge listen to podcasts. I've had people tell me they've listened to 2 or 3 of my podcasts while taking a driving trip a couple of hours.
That's right, in the car.
Yeah.
We listen to a lot of things. Janice and I do a lot of monitoring of our own broadcast in the car. In an hour or 2 hours, we can cover a lot of what we've done. And we urge people to do that. It's not distracting because you're listening. You're not watching a picture. But the whole thing, as you point out about the young people I know they don't read the newspaper anymore, which is a shame because I love newspaper. I think I grew up with it. It's something you can touch, and I love the Times for that reason. For whatever, it's there. It's paper. It's print. I can read it. But the kids don't do it.
And you know what? When you don't read the newspaper, you wind up reading only what you like. When you read electronically, you only get what you like. You don't catch the little tenant story in the corner of B3 that you might not have normally read.
That's so true,
that gets your attention. You miss those. And those are where the stories are sometimes.
No question about it, particularly locally.
Yes.
Oh, my. I also take great exception to people say, I never read the Times, it's too conservative. Or I don't read the Post, it's too liberal. Because I think you should be listening to both sides. I like to say people, read the Times. It's a different impression than you get from the Post. The Post is different than the Times. But don't just stop with one. Find out other ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's a 2-newspaper town is important.
Oh, boy, isn't it? And when
Yes.
this was one newspaper, it was a bad thing for our citizens. Now, how about, does yours a subscription service on your...
You can subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, and like you said, it doesn't cost a dime. It's free.
It's all yours.
How can people resist?
It's radio without a transmitter, huh?
Oh.
And you don't need a car for it. You can get it anywhere.
And if you just go cigars, ampersand, the and sign, curveballs, you'll be able to find it.
You're a star, and you continue to be. I would love to have you back doing your talk show in the middle of the day, because I'm getting tired of all the... And I love the Redskins, but too much is too much is too much. What in the... Michelle Obama said that about enough is enough. I think that about the Redskins radio. I love radio, and I love to read the paper, and I love to read you, Thom. And will you got to tell your listeners to subscribe to this podcast? We'll tell our listeners to subscribe to yours.
Absolutely. Cigars and curveballs.
And baseball.
Yes.
And you're a baseball man. I'm glad of that.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm glad. I'm sorry they didn't win, but the Cubs ain't going to win either. What do you think
Doesn't
of that?
look like it. Looks like
Thom
the
Loverro,
Dodgers are
thank
going
you
to
so
win.
much.
Thank
You're
you,
a good
Andy.
man.
So are you.
And we'll stay in touch, babe.
Okay.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 1 with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town podcast episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. We welcome your comments and suggestions on how you like the show or who you'd like to hear from next. Catch us on Facebook at Our Town DC or visit our website at OurTownDC.com. Our special thanks to WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. for hosting our podcasts.